$574. That was my electric bill in June of 2024. And honestly, that bill was kind of shocking. You see, I was still pretty new to California, and this was my second bill with PG&E. Now, that bill used over 1,100 kilowatt hours in one billing cycle, and peak electricity was around 63 cents per kilowatt hour. So after seeing that number, I knew that I had to do something about this. So I immediately started to try to figure out what people around here actually do. How could we lower this bill? So the first thing I started looking into was a normal whole house solar system. Get some roof panels, get a big inverter, some batteries, something that could offset most of my power bill. And the thinking was pretty simple. If I'm going to pay $500 a month anyway, maybe I should be paying that towards something I own. But the more I talked to solar companies, the more I realized how expensive that gets also. Once you start putting together a system, you can range from $18,000 to over $50,000 depending on size and equipment. So now you're not just talking about lowering your power bill, you're talking about a major purchase. And that's if you want to buy your system. You also can lease a solar system or do a power purchase agreement. So with a lease, you don't own the system. A solar company owns it, installs it, and you pay a monthly fee to use it. With a power purchase agreement, the company still owns and maintains the system, but instead of a flat lease payment, you just buy the electricity the system produces at a set price per kilowatt hour. Now, in my area, all these options are probably going to be cheaper than paying PG&E in the long run. PG&E is very expensive. So if you don't want to have to worry about installing the system, or if something breaks, you don't have to worry about maintaining the system, then these options could make sense for you. However, for me, it still felt like I was signing up for another long-term bill. And even though I wanted to stop getting crushed by these PG&E bills, I wasn't totally sold on these whole house systems from these installers or big companies. So I kept digging. And eventually, I started running into the do-it-yourself solar world. Off-grid systems, hybrid inverters, battery banks, people building their own systems. And that's where I kept seeing EG4. Now, what caught my attention was the idea that you didn't have to build the whole thing at once. You could start small and then scale the system as your needs changed. Now, that made more sense to me than jumping straight into a $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 whole house system. And eventually, that led me to the EG4 hybrid solar mini split. Going back to my original problem, my high electricity bill, the biggest culprit of my bill was the AC system. Now, my house had a 2-ton central AC system, and it worked. Sort of. I noticed anything above 100 degrees and it just struggled to keep up with. Now, another issue with any central AC system is that every time it turns on, it cools the entire house. So it doesn't matter if you're using that room or not, it's still going to try to cool it. And with PG&E pricing, you don't really want to use electricity to cool rooms that you are not using. So I decided to start small. Instead of replacing my whole electrical system, I started with the main problem, my AC. I installed the EG4 24K hybrid solar mini split in the main living room area. Now the total cost, including the unit and the panels, was $3,472.48. Now I ordered it beginning of June. I had received it by the end of June, and by June 30th, 2024, it was installed and ready to use. So as of May 2026, it has been running for almost 2 years now. Now later, I added a master bedroom mini split and then a guest bedroom mini split. So the master bedroom unit has been running for about a year and a half, and the guest bedroom unit has been running for roughly around a year. Now I chose mini splits for a few reasons. First, they're very efficient. They use variable speed compressors, they avoid duct losses, and they don't have to cool the entire house every time they turn on. They let you cool by zone. So now, when we don't have guests over and no one's using our guest room, we don't have to cool that room at all. So instead of one big central system trying to cool everything, the house now cools in smaller, targeted sections. And again, that's a big deal when your electricity is really expensive. Let's talk a little bit more about the numbers. So the 24K EG4 hybrid solar mini split has used about 2,751 kilowatt hours total. Now out of that, 1,473 kilowatt hours came directly from solar. So over half of the energy this system used never came from PG&E. At my average electricity price, which is around 50 to 53 cents per kilowatt hour, that solar contribution is worth roughly $700 to $775 in electricity I didn't have to pay for. It's good to keep in mind a few important details also. 2024 was a record-breaking heat wave in this area. 2025 was much more of a mild summer. There were not nearly as many 100-degree days as there were in 2024. So the mini split did not have to work as hard. Also, I barely run this unit from December through February. And then when I do run it during the summer, I usually keep the house around 72 to 75 degrees. So I'm not trying to freeze the house out. This is just normal, comfortable use. Now let's move over to the mini splits that are not solar powered. For example, the master bedroom mini split, it's used about 1,378 kilowatt hours in its lifetime. Now at my average electricity price, that equals roughly $690 total. And since it has been running for about a year and a half, that means I'm spending roughly $35 to $40 per month to cool and heat the master bedroom. Now during winter, this unit is usually off during the day. During summer, I usually leave it around 75 degrees during the day because my dog likes to sleep in the bedroom. Now at night, I usually keep it around 68 degrees. And so for the comfort it gives us, $35 to $40 a month feels pretty reasonable. Moving over to the guest bedroom mini split, it's used about 142 kilowatt hours total, which is roughly about $70 total. And since it has been installed for around a year, that means this room costs about $5 to $6 per month. Now that's the clearest example of why zoning is really cool. The room barely gets used, so it barely uses electricity. With central AC, that room would have been cooled every time the system turned on, whether someone was in there or not. So across all three mini splits, the living room, the master bedroom, and the guest bedroom, we used a total of 4,271 kilowatt hours to date. Now compare that to the old central AC bill. That old system used over 1,100 kilowatt hours in one billing cycle. So that means all three mini splits combined over almost 2 years have used less than 4 months of electricity at that old bill's pace. And I know that part is not perfect. I only have that one major central AC bill to go off of, so this is more of a guess. But it's the best comparison I have. That bill used about 1,100 kilowatt hours in 1 month. If I had kept using the old central AC through 2 more summers, even at a more conservative estimate at 3 heavy cooling months per year, that could have been around 6,600 kilowatt hours. And that's just the heavy summer months. If I add other months where the AC still runs a little bit, the old system could realistically have used somewhere around 8,000 to 10,000 kilowatt hours over the same time period. And again, at roughly 50 cents per kilowatt hour, that could have been anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 in electricity. And again, that's just an estimate. It's not a perfect comparison because I don't have exact numbers. But when I compare that to the mini split data, I think it's pretty safe to say that I saved a decent amount of money switching over from a central AC system to the mini splits. And then we can tie that data in with what I've actually spent. So all three mini splits combined have used about 4,271 kilowatt hours. At my average PG&E pricing, that's probably around $2,100 to $2,200 worth of electricity. But with the solar panel hybrid system offset of about $700 to $775, the amount I paid PG&E to run all three mini splits is around $1,400 to $1,500. Now, if we compare that to the old system estimate, that suggests I may have already avoided somewhere around $2,500 to $3,500 in electricity cost. Again, that's not exact, but I think it shows you how efficient these mini splits are. And looking through my newer PG&E bills, my electric bill is usually much closer to $140 to $190 per month, which is still not cheap. PG&E is still very expensive, but it's a lot different than seeing a bill close to $600. But when it comes to any solar system, something you always want to know is how fast is it going to pay itself off. So looking at the main hybrid solar mini split, which again cost me $3,472, so far with the solar production alone avoiding us about $700 to $775 in electricity, that means that solar hybrid system has already paid back around 22% of its cost. So based only on the solar offset, we can estimate the system will pay itself off in about 4 to 5 years. But if I include the fact that it replaced a much less efficient central AC setup, the real world payoff could be closer to 3.5 to 4 years, especially if summers get hotter again and as PG&E rates continue to climb. And as a side note, it's also produced some peace of mind. So when we have power outages, it's nice to know that during the day at least, when the sun's up, I can still have a running AC. But that thought also brings us to the next piece of the puzzle. Now the mini splits lowered how much power I use, especially during the day with the hybrid unit. However, when the sun goes down, I'm still buying electricity from the grid. So the next step would be to get a battery and inverter set up, which I did order this month, which I'll cover what I purchased in a future video once it gets here. But I wanted to make this video for anyone else looking at a huge electric bill and trying to figure out where to even start. Because when I got that $574 bill, I spent a lot of time trying to find real information from normal people showing, what they bought, what it cost, and whether it was even worth it. And I'm definitely not saying everyone needs mini splits, nor am I saying that my way was the best way. This is just the route I ended up taking. I know there are a lot of different ways people can lower their electric bill. Some people go all in on a huge solar system. Some people just move to a different state where it's not as expensive, but this is just what made sense for me. And obviously my setup isn't perfect, but looking back now, I'm glad I started doing something instead of just continuing to pay bigger and bigger bills.